Our LCS is Cowabunga Comics, Lake Country, Wisconsin's best pop culture destination for new comics, back issues, gaming, retro video games, vinyl, and figures. Give them a call, 262-569-9999. Check them out online at cowabungacomics.com or follow them on Twitter at Incredicow. They are our LCS, and we utilize their deep discount mail order service to bring Oconomowoc, Wisconsin closer to us. They'll take care of you. Tell them Drew and Kyle sent you. Say hi to Eric and James from us. If you need an LCS, you can't go wrong with Cowabunga Comics. The good folks at Comics for Fun and Profit have been doing 2 episodes a week for quite some time now, and it's all thanks to, first of all, Jason, and second of all, our patrons who allow us to add the space on our server, broadcast more, store more, share more with you, the listeners. I'm envious of those of you who have unlimited storage and media server capabilities. We pay for ours here at the C4FAP. It ain't cheap. We thank you so much for those of you who go to patreon.com/comicsfunprofit and contribute at any level to say thanks, to say, I want to be a part of your Slack channel conversations. I want to get exclusives. I want to get early access. I want to get ad-free access. I want to get swag. I want to get some free stuff. Whatever your reasoning is, we appreciate it at any level because it does make a difference. So from the bottom of Kyle and I and Jason's heart, thank you for contributing.
Aloha! It's Jason from Hawaii. Welcome to a special edition of the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. In this episode, I will be interviewing friends of the podcast, comic book creators Lee Durfey-Lavoie. Lee, did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, sir, you did. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Veronica Agarwal. Veronica, did I pronounce your last name correct? Okay. All right, thank you. Because listeners know I butcher last names very bad. Oh, you guys should hear me with Japanese last names. Those are bad, and I'm half Japanese. It's, because anyway, okay. Now, they are here to promote their latest original graphic novel, Sink or Swim. It is part of the Random House graphic imprint that is part of the Random House children's book. You can get this either in trade paperback or in hardcover. This book comes out on June 4th, and it is just in time for summer reading and for summer camp. So, Lee and Veronica, welcome back to the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing very well. We're both recovering from a cold. We had a nice trip in Columbus to talk about Just Roll With It to some children out there that was hosted by some of the PTO organizations in Upper Arlington, Columbus, Ohio. And we got a little sick on our way back, but that's okay. Now we've been doing a lot better. And really excited to be back here. Thank you so much, Jason.
Yeah, we're excited to talk to you again because last time was so much fun.
We literally have been raving about like how excited we are to come back and talk to you because the first time that we did it with you was so wonderful. It was really one of the best podcast experiences we've had, and your kindness and appreciation has really touched us. So thank you for having me back.
I'm not being sarcastic or not, but it's just I do my best. I do my best. I'm not gonna, but thank you for the kind words. And so, but we need to move on, because, all right. So Lee and Veronica's first book was Just Roll With It. Now that came out in December of 2021. And of course, like Lee and Veronica said, they're still promoting this Just Roll With It. It's a great book. And in a little bit, I'm gonna ask them to just go over the book, what the story is about and so forth. Again, now this book, Just Roll With It, is also from Random House graphic imprint. Now, Lee and Veronica, I'm just going to ask because it's been a while. Now, is there any other works you guys have done in the past or you want to promote or anything, or?
No, right now it's just Roll With It and the new upcoming Sink or Swim.
Okay. All right. Now, where can people follow you on social media?
We have Twitter and Instagram. My Twitter is at Lee Durfee. Pretty straightforward.
Oh, and my Twitter is at Anu, which is ANUANEW. And my Instagram is at Wispagram, so WISBAGRAM.
And I also have an Instagram. You won't see too much activity from me there, but I will talk about Sink or Swim there occasionally. So that's the one is the number one, truly on Instagram.
Okay. All right. Now shout outs. And like I said, as you know, during the interview, I'm going to either say Lee or Veronica. Either one of you guys can jump in. So it's not like, and so now please give a big shout out to your agent.
Yes, we would love to. I mean, Susan Graham is our agent, and really without them, I don't know, we'd still be looking at the contract for the first book. They're incredible. They're like our lifeline. Anytime we have a problem or a question or anything like that, Susan is just an angel with us and very patient with us and very supportive. So throughout getting the book deal, getting the book made, the publication for the first one, the second, everything with the second one, and
even now, like with emails that we've been getting, some early reviews that the person in charge of that, Danny, has been sending us. Susan always chimes in and replies with how excited they are, and like that is so incredibly kind because they're super busy and they don't need to reply to every email, but like just that they are still happy to see like the articles and stuff that's not really necessarily part of their like job is really
the whole team at Random House is really amazing. We have Winnie Leopard, Danny Diaz, who are both like editors, and for Whitney was the main editor for book 1 and 2, and Danny has been like co-starring everything with us.
Okay, yeah.
Danny and let's talk about Whitney first, I guess. Whitney's great. Whitney's super lovely, so smart, so good at their job, and I know they do a ton of stuff behind the scenes for us that we don't even get to hear. And Danny as well. Danny is really the point person. Like if something needs to get like handled or addressed, like Danny's on it. And they'll like for everything from like editing to publicity to interviews to seeing, oh, here's a review that was good for Sink or Swim or something like that. Like Danny's there. But really everybody at the team, even the ones we like don't know the names of who are behind the scenes at Random House, has been fantastic. Juliet Goodman,
yes,
also wonderful. I think you worked a little more with her if you want to talk about that.
So she's the one who is helping us with like the book design. Really great job on the title, like what kind of like font and how the design of it that she wanted to do, and her vision for it was great, and honestly it was perfect from the get-go. And then also if you want to mention Cynthia.
Our current publicist right now for Sink or Swim is Cynthia Liwachuska. And Cynthia's been also magical. The last time we were here, I believe it was Superfans and Hannah and that team that were helping us with the publicity for Just Roll With It 1. And it's kind of interesting because the first time around was December 2021, and we kind of know where the world was at that point, and so the publicity was like, super like confusing, but Superfan was great there. And then Cynthia now is like so on top of it for us. And now this is kind of like our first publicity cycle where we can like go and like do things and go places. And so like, I mean, like, I don't know, we're not necessarily like the biggest travel people. It's all the stress and that comes with it. And so Cynthia handles all that stuff for us. Cynthia will shoot us an email. I mean, I'm always touched when somebody can email me back like super fast and when they don't need to, you know what I mean? And Cynthia's the person. Cynthia is on like everything for us. I don't know, like I don't even know an example, but like anything that like I said for all the Random House team, and I can't say it enough. And like they're so good at their jobs, and they make our lives so easy. And like something that could be so like complicated and like scary and like personal, getting the book made and dealt with and all that stuff is like, if if we need anything from anybody at there, like
Yeah.
they're like so good to us. So it's been an incredible experience both with book 1 and 2, where you feel so at ease with the team. And if you like
Nice.
book 1 or book 2, you like Just Roll With It or Sink or Swim, like none of them would be half of what they are without all the great hands at Penguin Random House who's helped us out. And that also extends to Gina, who I think has moved on to separate things as well, who first saw Just Roll With It when it was a 12-page mini comic at a convention, and really liked it and really kind of took a gamble on us to get 2 books out of it. So without Gina's assistance and appreciation from the start, we wouldn't be here right now with you. So everybody at Penguin has always been super, super good to us, and we're so grateful for that.
Well, thank you very much, Lee. Thank you very much for sharing that. Also, to listeners, I want to give a big shout out to Lee and Veronica because they sent me an advanced reading copy. I read it. It's a very good story. So before we jump in, let's talk about Just Roll With It. Because I want to talk a little bit about that book, and then we'll jump in, and literally we'll jump in, sink or swim. So now for Just Roll With It, a quote from Kirkus Review, an accessible, compassionate story of growth and learning. Lee, I'm going to start off with the question with you, and Veronica jump in. What was this story about?
So Just Roll With It was about a young girl named Maggie who starts middle school, and you deal with the regular middle school stress of like grades, bullies, making friends, what club do you do, how do you handle like your parents' expectations for you, and also dealing with OCD on top of it all. Plus, there was also a creature outside of her school that needed to be dealt with, that she and her friends were the only ones who could kind of figure out what that was. And it was I love it. I love the book. I'm very touched by how much other people have enjoyed it as well.
Yes.
And we get a lot of good responses from it, and we're super excited to be able to continue some of that story in Sink or Swim, because you'll see some of the characters from Just Roll With It 1 in Sink or Swim. So we were super excited to be able to not only make what we thought was a pretty good book, and then continue it as well.
All right, let's just jump right in. Let's talk about Sink or Swim. Veronica, either Veronica or Lee, either you guys want to start off with, what is the story about?
So this story is, as Lee said, it's in the same universe as Just Roll With It, but it follows some new characters. So it follows Ty and Max and Heather, who are all going to summer camp together. They're 3 best friends, and they had all planned to go to the sleepaway camp together to study science and engineering and all this really cool hands-on kind of like experiments and stuff. But then in the middle of the year, Ty breaks his arm and is unable to swim for the remainder of the swimming season, which is the sport that him and Max do together. So they've grown apart through the school year. Ty feels really awkward. He hasn't spoken to Max as much as he'd like. He's kind of withdrawn in on himself, and he feels really guilty about that. So Sink or Swim is beginning with camp starting and Ty kind of feeling very, awkward and ashamed of kind of ignoring his 2 best friends, and not really knowing how to deal with that.
Yeah, and another big thing for Ty is also that since he broke his arm and he hasn't been swimming like he used to, he put on weight, and he doesn't know how to handle that, and how he's changed in a way that he doesn't like, and a way that he feels is really, really impactful. And he has to deal with that on top of like, oh, I feel like a bad person because I haven't talked to my friends. I also feel like a bad person because of this weight that I have now. And it's this cycle that he kind of goes through and has to work through in the book.
Now, we've already talked about Ty, Max. I have a question. Max Allen. Was that a nod to the crime novelist Max Allan Collins? I'm just asking.
I saw your question and I was so like shocked by that, because definitely wasn't something I was thinking about.
Okay,
And then
yeah.
and then I looked up, oh, who is it? I'm like, I've read so much of his work over
Yeah.
the years. I was like, maybe subconsciously that's why I picked it. I didn't even know. But like, I don't know, like Road to Perdition, he did stuff, he did work with like Dick Tracy. I'm like, I've read
Yes.
so much of stuff like that over the years. And I'm like, wow, like maybe that was it. And I didn't even know it. But yeah, no, Max Allan Collins, also a great person in the comics and also like movie novelization and screenplays and stuff like that.
That's right. Yes.
He's a great writer.
Yeah. Okay. No, but because when I saw Max Sound, it's like, okay, all right. And then I know you guys spoke about Heather. I want to talk a little bit about Dan because Dan, um, and feel free to correct me, okay? Because it's like because when Ty and Max when they're go to camp and then all of a sudden, okay, Ty and Max, you guys are in this cabin. Oh, and Dan's with you guys, and they kind of look at Dan as like, uh,
Yeah.
he's kind of Dan has his little quirks. I mean, he's a good kid.
Yes. We try to make it. Everybody's got their own little thing, and Dan you'll find is really interested in a certain bug that he thinks he's going to be able to find at camp again. And Dan's great. Dan and who you'll also see as a side character involved in Sink or Swim, as well as Jamie, the counselor, you might recognize from Just Roll With It 1. Dan and I were both in Maggie's RPG club, and Jamie, the camp counselor, is actually Maggie's one of Maggie's older sisters.
Oh my God, I didn't reckon. Oh,
Yep.
that is so cool. That is nice. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
so
It's obvious that Ty and Max were not expecting
Yeah.
Dan to bunk because I was a little worried that if it was like not like explained enough that they thought like, okay, it's just going to be us two in this room,
Yeah.
and then through whatever circumstances they actually have a third roommate, and they're like, they have this tension going on between them. They haven't spoken in a long time.
This whole awkward, big, dramatic thing they have to go
Yes.
through. And then also, there's Dan, and Dan's a sweetheart. Dan, Dan helps them both in his own way with the stuff that they both have to go through. Because, and one thing that was really important to me for Just Roll With It 1 is I wanted the characters to really feel alive and like off the page. And the same thing continues to Sink or Swim, where Dan is that it starts off as kind of like a joke, like, oh, who's this kid that we don't know? But he's not a side character in his own story, and he doesn't have to put up with their kind of nonsense and their drama the whole time. He doesn't have to take that. He's his own person. And so I wanted to make you really like Dan, because I liked writing Dan. I thought Dan was a lot of fun. I wanted to kind of continue that thread of like, oh, he's his own person, and like he also exists. He doesn't have to kind of deal with the stuff that sometimes you might kind of find yourself in that awkward situation. He doesn't have to deal with that. And it was a lot of fun writing that, and all of his other stuff with the beetle and the bug that you'll see when you get to read Sink or Swim, listener. And it was great, the difference between Brent, who's one of the other camp counselors, who's kind of a big role for Ty and for the other kids, and Jamie as well, because they're both super different. Brent was a lot of fun to write too, because he felt like he was a really like a golden retriever, but if a golden retriever was a human being. So he's a lot of fun. He's very nice. He's a sweet guy. And he's very sort of like surfer bro. Right. Which is a lot of fun, which is nifty, because Jamie is not that person. So there's two different kind of some more like quote unquote like adult figures in his life at camp. So we have a lot of fun with the characters that you meet in Sink or Swim.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Let's see. I'm trying to look at my questions because how did you guys come up with this story? Like, was this based on something like swimming, breaking the arm, and
so when we started talking about what the second book was going to be, after Just Roll With It 1 had been done, and we started, we were contracted for 2 books. What's the second book? It came kind of naturally that book 1 was maybe a little more like mental, with Maggie dealing with the OCD, and quote unquote like more like girl focused because of the girl main character.
Mhm.
Like, okay, so we flip that on its head, and now it's a boy main character, and the problems are obviously very internal as well. And not that Maggie didn't have external problems, but immediately the problem is external for Ty because it's his body, and it's not so much just in the mind.
I think for
And
me also is really important that, I feel like weight can be such a like girl centric problem
yeah,
sometimes.
Mm.
A lot of media, like, if they have girl characters and then if the girl characters are worried about their weight and it's such a focus on, girls' perception of body image and how, the world expects girls to be skinny or expects girls to look a certain way. And I really wanted it to be, like I really wanted us to make sure that we focused on, a boy's perspective, that because I
Mhm.
know that's something that you
yeah,
grew up with.
exactly.
And it's something I feel like that a lot of guys grow up with, where if you're kind of like a bigger kid growing up and you're a guy, I think a lot of people expect you, or a lot of maybe guys fall into like the class clown sort of role because
Mhm.
that's what's the stereotype of that character in media. You have like a bigger best friend and he's usually the funny guy or like the helping guy or like that kind
Mhm.
of thing. And I really wanted it to be giving a spotlight to like a character that's usually maybe, oh, this is a side character, he's the best friend or he's like
Yeah,
off to the side kind of thing.
yeah, and like Veronica kind of alluded to, like I played sports as a kid, but I was never good, and I
Mhm.
never gave it my all like Ty does. Like Ty and Max are really dedicated to swimming. It really
Mhm.
means a lot to them. That wasn't me. I played
Mhm.
because my mom was like, "You should play a sport," and I was like, "All right," but it
Mhm.
wasn't like a big thing for me. If it wasn't my mom saying play a sport, I would have never left the room. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I would have left my bedroom. So sports weren't a huge thing to me. But weight was a weight. The the amount of like fat I had on my stomach, that my height, all of that stuff, like was a really big deal for me. Um,
Mhm.
you know, from middle school to now, you know what I mean? Like it was so prevalent of like a problem
Yes.
in my life that it was as much of a problem for me in my self-image as my own like mental health issues were like anxiety and depression in school. And so when we were able to write Just Roll With It one, and we were able to give a book and have it in somebody's hands, where like, okay, these are the mental problems I have, and I can talk to somebody about this, and I can get some help in some way or some relief just from reading it. Um, it it was scary. Let me say that it was very scary for me to be like, I want to take this thing that is a problem
Mhm.
for me today. You know what I mean? Right now,
Mhm.
and make a book about it so that some other kid doesn't have to go through the
Yeah.
20 years of dealing with it. You know what I mean? Maybe you get help sooner, so it's not so much a
Yes.
problem. Feel so bad about it. So that was the genesis for Sink or Swim.
Mhm.
Was how do we combine all of that, and how do we try our best to make another story where somebody else who's facing a different problem can be like, I feel some relief in some way, or I can
Mhm.
give it to a parent or a trusted adult and be like, I feel like this and I need help.
Yes. Yeah. One thing, now this is an off the cuff comment I didn't write down for you guys, but the one thing I love about both of these books, because it's like about 320 about 300
Yep.
310 pages
They both
story.
ended up being about 320 pages,
No,
almost exact.
no, but the other thing, but what's good is it and both stories are very good. You're sucked into it. You read it, and along the way, there's fun things that the characters like Time, Max, and Heather do. They're trying to build a boat, and sometimes Max goes and we're to go all those, but the thing is, but it's enough to breathe, where we see Ty struggle with, there's certain days where it's okay, hey, like Brent will go, hey, come on, it's dinner time, Ty, let's go to the mess hall, and Ty goes, okay, and but it's not just one scene. It's like it goes through the course of the book where you see a couple times where it's like
Yeah.
he's ready to eat the burger, and like he looks at his kind of you see him, and there's no thought, it's just you can tell already what he's thinking already.
Mhm.
That's what I love about these two books. It gives it room to breathe.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah,
struggle is not
very
just
lucky.
I'm
with
sorry.
that. Sorry, I was gonna say I think we were very lucky with that, like with the amount of pages we were allowed, that we could be really what's the word I'm looking for? We could be really giving like a lot of room for the story and
Yes.
really relaxed with the pacing.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to stack, bad mental health days on top of bad mental health days on top of bad mental health days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can really show how these kinds of things are really ironically kind of like how the theme of Sink or Swim is water is more like a wave.
Yeah, there's an ebb and a flow to it.
Yeah.
And like Veronica said, like, we were really lucky about that because, I think if I think about a book I read in middle school, it's supposed to be about a mental health issue of some kind,
Mhm.
right? Which were, I think, relatively far and few between, but it was so dramatic. You know what I mean? It was always like the worst thing in the world, and everything was miserable, and it was like,
Yes.
but that's not necessarily true, right? And like obviously there are times where like if you're in a depressive episode or whatever, you have your week or two where things are not good,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not your whole world, right? That's not your whole life. Like you can have
Yeah.
a depressive day or a really bad mental health day or something like that, and the next day, oh, hey, look, the sun's shining and I feel pretty good.
And it also
Yes.
really
And then
highlights
20 minutes
how,
later, you feel terrible again. But like,
that healing is not linear.
yeah,
And it's an important reminder, I think, for kids who maybe like, I dealt with this already. Why am I still feeling
That's
this
true.
way? Or why am I still feeling upset about this? And it's like, even as adults, we have those times where, I have stuff that crops up where I'm like, I have worked through this, this emotion multiple times, in therapy of feeling like, oh, I don't like being uncomfortable, and so I don't want to do this thing. And it's like a constant rehashing of I've dealt with this issue, but it doesn't go away.
yeah.
It's kind of like a constant every day I choose to face it. And I think another thing I was going to say was that the Berrybrook Middle School series by Svetlana Chamkova is one of my favorite middle grade book series, because like all of these problems that the kids face in those books, while they are objectively perhaps small scale, they're dealing like we're dealing with something for the science project, and we want to do this art fair, and I don't know how to talk to my crush. Those are maybe in the grand scheme of life maybe small problems, especially when you're an adult looking back. But when you're reading those books, they do feel very important. And I really wanted to emulate that in the books that we make, where you have these issues that are maybe not like the end of the world, but they're still just as important as
Anything else.
Yeah, and they're just as important. What's the word I'm looking for? Like it's not, it can be a small issue, but just also be just as upsetting. And it doesn't have to be something where you're like, oh, this is life changing, but I'm still dealing with it, kind of thing.
And it also helps that Veronica's art style is I think so clear and so cute and so helpful, because you don't need me writing a thought bubble every time.
Yes.
When something is going wrong with Ty, you have Veronica here is able to be like, either with a visual metaphor of like the water kind of creeping in,
Yes.
and or just like he just looks upset and you can just tell that he's upset. So that's also another great benefit of it being a graphic novel as well, is that it doesn't need to be so constant like it might in a prose novel, because you get to just relax with the image for a second. Like you said, you get to breathe, and he gets to breathe. Everything's like, okay, for a moment, things should be fine before they get the wave comes again and it gets worse again.
I'm gonna jump around a little bit because I want to talk a little bit about Veronica's art, because there's some stuff I love in here, and then I want to talk to you about, and because Lee, I know we talked a little bit about it, but I also want to talk about the dialogue too. But Veronica, because Lee, like you said, Veronica's art style, like you said, because there's times when you see Ty at the table, and listeners, I'm describing what Ty does. He has his elbow on the table, he's looking down. He's going through some stuff. It's not like you said, you don't have to put thought bubbles, and you don't have to it's just clear he's going through some stuff. What I love visually is, we already talked about it, that I guess and correct me if I'm wrong, but whenever Ty feels overwhelmed. Like you said, it's the waves that come and hit him. You know, because he's a swimmer, and all of a sudden you see all of a sudden the water starts rising above him, you know, and it's a visual thing. It's a visual metaphor. It's not, you know, and sometimes he's treading, and there's sometimes where he's like literally drowning, or there's like a huge wave like ready to crash on him. You know, I know you talked about it, but do you guys want to add anything else to that, Veronica? Or
Yeah.
you
I think so it was really a lot of fun for me to figure out. So in the first book, we had, you know, the way that Maggie dealt with her anxiety. I kind of illustrated it as this buzzing, this kind of like all these black scribbly lines that were kind of like closing in on her.
hmm
And so in this book, I wanted to do you know, something with the water because water is such like an important thing to Ty. He really enjoyed swimming before he broke his arm and before, you know, he had to take a break from the water, and now it's kind of become this thing that, you know, he feels like is maybe attacking him, and then also kind of that he feels like that he's grappling with. You know, he can't reconcile and kind of meet the water halfway. It's either always overwhelming him
hmm
completely or it's completely kind of absent. Um, and so I had a lot of fun playing around with different ways I could portray that. You
hmm
know, sometimes I really like the scenes where I have the water just slowly rising and completely filling
Yes,
the panels,
yes,
um, almost more than the water that's splashing into a panel, because I feel like splashing into a panel, that's kind of like maybe the quote unquote obvious way to,
hmm
to portray like a very anxious moment of
hmm
like this overwhelming wave. Um, but I also wanted to think of other ways that water could be kind of suffocating.
yes,
Um, and so it was really interesting for me to explore how to depict that. While, you know, because also water is so versatile. And
hmm
so what are the different ways that we can use this visually, color
hmm
wise, um, to make the page look different and to
yes,
visualize and show the
hmm
anxiety.
Yeah, I mean, I know, we made the book and I'm obviously a little biased, but I thought Veronica did a fantastic job.
yes,
I thought like,
hmm
if you look at it, there's like 3 or 4 different colors she uses for the water. It's not like the same even
yes,
tone of water. And that also like, oh, maybe the darker color means like this is like worse, right?
hmm
Like, uh, or sometimes it's like a little more see-through. I thought she did a really, really great job with that. I know she spent a lot of time on it. I also think it adds such like a visceralness
hmm
to it. You know what I mean? Because the art style is like so like cute, and it's a
yes,
very welcoming art style. It's very easy,
yes,
in a really good way. And when you get to those moments with like Maggie or with Ty, where you're like overwhelmed and like boom
yes,
pressure, or boom he's drowning, and you're like, oh,
hmm
like you really kind of feel that, or at least I hope so, because that's how like it it feels like to me sometimes, right? Like that, like the oppressiveness, or like the the sense of like, oh man, I really don't like the way I looked in that photograph at like
hmm
Christmas or whatever, right?
hmm
I feel like I look so like big or weird, or I just don't like that angle of myself. I feel like whatever. You get that self talk, that negativity, that
yes, it's yeah,
so heavy and so like, oh, you can't escape it sometimes. So
hmm
I think Veronica did a great job with it, and I really really liked it. So I hope when people pick up Sink or Swim, they also appreciate it, because it's a really good job. I should have thought ahead. I should have grabbed the book, but there's just some pages in it where like later on, I don't want to give too much away, but later on he kind of has this talk to himself, that starts becomes like underwater, and I think that's so good. It's probably one of my favorite sequences in the book, because it really does feel like that very like visceral anger kind of that you can have at yourself,
yes,
uh, that I thought really felt really honest.
yeah. No, thank you very much, Lee. Thank you very much for sharing that and opening up. Thank you very much.
Of course.
There's a couple more things I want to talk about, Ron, because I love is the tension between Ty and Max. Because man, when they get at it, you see the squiggly lines and the and there's like dramatic bright colors, you know, do you guys want to talk about that? Some of those scenes?
Yeah, that was actually also something it feels weird saying oh, I had so much fun, doing the scenes while they were fighting,
Yeah.
where these
No,
characters of ours were, really upset, but it was so much fun to do. I spent a lot of time experimenting with the colors back and forth, going,
Mhm.
if I wanted because that's one of the really nice things about digital art is that you can take your colors and you can overlay them with each other. You can use different tools in Photoshop to make the colors kind of intersect and create new
Mhm.
colors. And so I was playing with that a lot and trying to get some really interesting combinations that
Mhm.
were different from what you would normally see them colored as. So you had their basic palette. Ty has his red shirt and his skin is a certain color and his hair is a certain
Yes.
color. But then in these really dramatic moments, I wanted to say, okay, you're taking what you expect, your expected colors of them, and how are we going to either heighten it, change it so that it feels very off. So even without reading the page, just looking, even if you looked at it without line art and just looked at the colors, you
Mhm.
could tell something wrong is happening here.
Yes. Mhm.
There's a few sequences in the book where I use this really, really bright yellow.
Mhm.
And actually, yellow is my favorite color, but the yellow that I chose for those, I really tried to go for something that was like, you look at this and you're like, that's a wrong yellow. That's something
Mhm.
about that is not good. Just looking at it kind of makes you feel like uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And so I really like love playing with color in that way and like
Mhm.
exploring that. Because I feel like talking about it now, I'm like, oh yeah, like I had so much fun. But at the time I was like, what do I do? Like I'm sitting at the computer for 3 hours staring at one panel. But it's kind of, you realize after the fact, like the not knowing what you're going to choose, I think is
Mhm.
also part of the fun part.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because at the time I was like, oh my God, this is hard and I have no idea what I'm doing. Um, but then looking back, you're like, I was just trying a bunch of different things and
Mhm.
really exploring. And once I found something I liked, I kind of went with it.
Mhm.
Um, and so like sometimes not knowing where you're going to end up, I think is one of like the best parts of art.
Yeah.
Yes.
You don't know going into it fully formed, like, oh, I know everything. I know
Oh
every
yeah.
color. I know every page layout I'm gonna use, every word I'm
Yeah.
gonna use. And so that like exploration really adds to it. And like there's a
I think
scene.
it's so easy for me, even personally, to forget that. Like when I start out at a project, I'm like, oh my God, like I'm not cut out for this. I'm not good enough for this. This is so bad. It doesn't look like what I want it to look like. Um, but then talking about it now, I'm like, oh, the whole point, is the journey of finding what you want it to be. That's the fun part.
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
learning to kind of enjoy that, I think, and getting to talk about it after the fact and realizing like, oh yeah, that is the fun part,
Yeah.
can
Mhm.
be really really healthy, I feel like, for the
Yeah.
mind to remember that like, no, you don't have the answers, and that's the point.
Yeah.
That's why you do
And
this in the
I
first
always
place.
marvel at Veronica's art because like I said, I wrote it, sure, but like there are scenes and there are moments where I'm like, wow, that hits way harder than I thought it was going to,
Yes.
because Veronica is able to pick colors that are like, oh, those are really good, or like
Yes.
those feel so natural, or oh, those are so unnatural. Like what's going
Mhm.
on? Just it makes it so more like in your face. Like there's a scene like you kind of talk about where Max like really like blows up, and it's like this kind of like it's like this reddish color, but it's almost like it's almost a little more like orange, almost a little more fluorescent.
Yeah, it was
And
interesting to
it's
do
not
that
quite like the
because
like
Mhm.
like normal red you might think,
Yes.
yeah,
right? It's this different thing. It's like, oh,
well, it's
there we
actually, I
go.
found it difficult to do that because Max and Heather both have red hair. So then
Yes.
figuring out the way to, because normally I feel like when you think about colors relating to emotions, you're like, okay, red is angry,
Mhm.
blue is sad, yellow is happy. And
Mhm.
so dealing with that, I was like, Max and Heather's hair is always red. So figuring out a way to make, their coloring seem especially heightened and like make sure, because you can't just, I couldn't just make all of the backgrounds where they're angry red because their hair is red and they would just fade right in. So
Mhm.
figuring out how to make their red hair a different red from the angry red and also make them pop against the page, and
Yes.
kind of playing around with that was a lot of fun.
Veronica Lee, again, thank you very much for opening up and sharing just opening up and sharing, like, the not only your struggles of doing the book, but also celebrating. It's like, now it's over. Yes, I can look back and some of this was, the colors were fun to do, but I know going through it must have been like,
Yeah,
so
oh yeah, there's definitely those moments where you're like, wow, this is like Veronica said, like I have no idea what I'm doing, man. I'm so screwed. Like I don't know what's going on. Like they're gonna think I'm a fraud. And then you're like, and then you can come back on it, and now it's like a year and a half or whatever since
yeah.
we worked on it, and you're like, oh, you know what, that was pretty good. We did pretty good here. That was a lot of fun. So it is good for us to have these moments with you where you're like, oh, you know what?
It's also funny because no matter how many times that happens to
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
Every single time without fail, you will go through the
Like we
same.
talked about with that ebb and flow, like, oh yeah, like it's his problem and it is back.
Yeah. Where no matter how many times I start a project, I always go through the beginning stages of like, oh my God, this is horrible. And I'm never going to get used to this. And then you spend, a week or so working on it, and you get back into your workflow, and then you're going much faster. But it's very funny because it's like, I don't know, it's kind of like this cyclical thing that humans kind of just always repeat through these same treads, and you wonder, like, how many times am I going to do this before I learn that, like, no, like this happens every time, you are fine.
All right, so Lee, I'm going to focus on you and Veronica, please jump in. So I know the target audience is like more like pre-teens, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
8 to 12, I think, is what the middle grade category is. Yeah.
Okay. So now I'm a 57-year-old man, but I love the dialogue in both books, because it feels natural. Now, this is a dumb process question. How did you guys work on the dialogue? Like, was there a conscious effort to make it where kids and their parents can enjoy reading this together, on their own, and also I want to, also too that, yeah. So let me just ask you guys that question. So, did you guys make a conscious effort to,
No, I'm really touched that you enjoy the dialogue because for the first book, it's the first Just Roll With It was the first like graphic novel I'd ever written. It was the longest thing I'd ever written by far for any type of project. So don't the first draft of Just Roll With It way back, 2018 or 19 or whatever it was so scary. And then it gets edited a lot, and we had our friend who's like an angel, a saint, like Paloma, is so smart, so good. Like every opinion Paloma has is a correct opinion, and if you disagree, you're wrong. And Paloma was like, looked through the book and read it and was like, I really like it, but the dialogue feels so after school special. It feels really preachy. And we're like, okay, so that has to be totally reworked because that's the last thing we want. You know what I mean? We don't be like we're talking down to a kid because kids are smart. You know what I mean? You sense that stuff a mile away. And you want you want your reader to have like an authentic reaction to it, and they're not going to get that if it feels like it was written by a committee of whatever, like government employees somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for Just Roll With It 1, the dialogue was completely reworked basically. And there's like a constant back and forth between Veronica. It is totally not just me behind the wheel for the dialogue. Like, you write the script, you go over it again yourself, you hand it in, and somebody else goes over it, and our agent Susan goes over it, and our editor Whitney and Danny, they go over it, and then Veronica actually starts to work on it, and you're like, okay, maybe this line doesn't actually work. Maybe this feels too long, or somebody's not really going to talk like this.
Yes.
How do we rework it? How do we change it? So it's a really like constant like state of change. And it's something that I really focused on for Sink or Swim when we get around to it too, is like, how do I make it feel like really natural?
Yes.
How to make it feel really normal, because I don't really think too much about like a target audience for the book. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
I can't. I'm not going to stop myself. I'm like, are parents going to be okay with this, or are you know what I mean? Are kids going to be like super okay? Because it's an imaginary audience that you're never going to you can never appease. You know what I mean? You just have to do your best to make it like a good sort of like piece of art on its own, right?
Yes.
And so that's something I thought of was how do we make it feel natural? Because no matter who you are, if it feels natural, it should click, right?
Yes.
So thank you, because it's something that we really worked hard on. It was a lot of back and forth. It was a lot of like, okay, we're gonna write the script and I'm gonna change all the dialogue again.
Mhm.
And then when Veronica's gonna get to it, she's gonna be like, this line is bad. Let's change this. And like, okay, how do we change it? Why is it bad? How can we get the point across? Do we even
Mhm.
need that line? You know what I mean? Like we talked about, like, can Veronica just showcase this and we can skip it?
Mhm.
So there's a lot of back and forth. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about working on a book and going through all of the stages that it goes through is that it's kind of a little bit like a living document where you have the lines, but they're not always set in stone.
Yeah.
And sometimes you revise the lines and you edit them. And sometimes it's because you think it sounds better, and sometimes it's just out of necessity.
Yeah.
Because
Mhm.
sometimes I would get to a page and I would put in the dialogue that Lee was writing, and I'm like, I cannot fit this
Mhm.
entire thing
Mhm.
in this bubble, in this panel.
Mhm.
So, I would either have to figure out a way to make it shorter, to cut it up into two bubbles,
Mhm.
figure out a way that it would be digestible on the page. And like through that evolution, I think it naturally
Mhm.
becomes more like more casual and
Yeah.
laid back, as opposed to when you first write it, maybe it feels a little stiff and
Yeah.
kind of like formulaic
Yeah.
almost, because you're laying out the script and you're saying like, okay, X happens and then Y happens and
Yeah.
then Z happens. And so in order to make those things move, you just kind of are plugging in
Yeah.
scenes.
And like there are times like through the creation of the book where Veronica was like she talked about like, oh, this has to be rearranged. And then sometimes it'll be like, oh, they already kind of talked about this here because you had to rearrange X, Y. So what do we talk about now? Or how can
Mhm.
we make this conversation like hit again and but in a different way? You know what I
Mhm.
mean? That's also part of the process is Veronica being like, I got rid of X, so now you need to do Y. And like we have to okay. And like that, like she said, becomes natural through the process of like just
Yes.
constant like change and editing.
Mhm.
Because like you said, it's not set in stone. That script is gonna look super different to the final
Mhm.
picture all said and done
It's really
because there's
funny.
so much like editing just like constantly
Yeah.
happening through the
Mhm.
creation of the book.
It's like really funny having this conversation because I'm thinking about all of the, all the incredible works that I love, all the incredible comics. And I'm like, reading these and I'm like, they're so well written. And I'm like, how do they do this? And I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, they probably also are, kind of molding it and crafting it as they go and creating this kind of, it's not giving, you're not giving the perfect line the first shot. You're
Mhm.
working through it and, and creating it as you go.
Yeah.
So it's funny that like, those things that like you're so insecure about, and then you think, you think about them for 2 seconds and you're like, oh, maybe, perhaps,
Yeah. I always think in high school I took a
Mhm.
creative writing class and we read Stephen King's On Writing.
Oh,
Um
okay.
which is a book he wrote it on writing about his life and how he writes and stuff like that. And I kind of always think about that when I'm writing too, because like he'll talk about stuff where like it's Stephen King, you know what I mean?
Yes.
You look at
Yes.
a writer who lives on the pages that he writes that okay, it's Stephen King. You don't really get much more successful than that. But even he'll be like, oh, Kill Your Darlings. And to be fair, it's been a long time since I've read the book, but it is on my shelf still. But like, oh, I threw away this manuscript for a book because I didn't like it, and then
Mhm.
my wife was like, "No, this is pretty good actually." So like,
Yes.
if Stephen King goes through that same editing process, I'm like, fine, I'll do it. You know what I mean? I'll
Yes.
it needs to get done.
Mhm.
Because the last thing I want to do is like be so attached to like a specific like line or a specific couple of
Yes.
like pages in the script and be like make the book suffer for it.
Mhm.
So like that, like I said, the constant editing between us and everybody at Penguin is like that's the key to the dialogue. Is like that's who really wrote it, is that editing stage and process.
Lee, Veronica, again, thank you very much for opening up and sharing, how you guys the thought process behind writing. The other thing, Lee, I love what you said is that you guys didn't want the book to come off as preachy
Yeah.
because it's a story of Ty, it's a story of Max, and you know, this is their story. This isn't the, you know, I can only, yeah, it's not a don't do drugs, you know, type of,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
it's not like
exactly.
that. It's like you said, it's not an after school special. It's just a story about kids growing up and the struggles that they go through. Um, I'm gonna try to start wrapping things up, or are you guys okay if we go over a little bit?
Yeah, yeah,
Or,
no, no, go ahead, please.
all right. So okay. So now in the acknowledgement section at the beginning of the book, Veronica, you wrote, quote, for Lee, I hope I was able to show your struggles with the same care and compassion that you gave to mine and just roll with it. I love you. Veronica, do you want to add anything more to that? Or
Yeah, I felt so. We always talk about the two books, how Just Roll With It is kind of my baby,
Mhm,
and Sink or Swim is Lee's baby, because Just Roll With It really focuses on, you know, a character that kind of looks like me, has, you know, anxiety, OCD, depression, a lot of the similar, you know, things that I had growing up, or especially more into adulthood. I feel like my anxiety got worse as I became more aware of the world. Um,
mhm,
and Lee, you know, really took that story and, you know, he crafted it and also really paid attention to, um, you know, he would say like, oh, you know, I took this part of Maggie and I drew it from our life experience and I took it from you. I took this thing that she's anxious about and I made it similar to how you
mhm,
get anxious about this thing, and kind of almost like taking the things that I was worried about, um and almost like taking each one, picking it up gently and like giving it a little kiss and like being like, we're gonna, you know, put these on the page and almost like
mhm,
heal um and I thought that was so incredibly sweet, and I wanted to be able to do a similar thing with this book because I knew that it was super important to him, talking about, you know, his issues with weight and anxiety and depression and feeling like you're not good enough and feeling like you take up too much space. um and so I wanted to do the same thing where, you know, I see these issues that, you know, you struggled with and you're trying to put them on the page, and I want to make sure that I'm, um, you know, when I'm editing, but also when I was illustrating, you know, that I'm
mhm,
really showing this with all of the, you know, with putting my best foot forward and making sure that it's really representing itself the way
mhm,
that you envisioned it, and then a way that people seeing it can really, you know, say, okay, I really am resonating with this.
Mhm.
mhm,
Um, you know, as opposed to like, oh, like maybe I don't really get what they were going for, like that kind of thing. You know, I wanted to, I guess the part of it is like, you know, you were making parts of Just Roll With It for me. And so I really felt like I was making parts of Sink or Swim for you specifically.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. I do. I mean, I felt the love through the whole process. So thank you. Um, but yeah. So thank you so much for that because that was so sweet. So what were you saying? Because I'm about to cry. So let's move on.
all right. Yes, let's move on. Now, Lee, you also wrote, quote unquote, to the 12-year-old Lee, I'm sorry I didn't know how to love you sooner, but I'm gonna ask, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. No. I mean, like I said this whole time was a Singerton was really about some of the like neurosis and problems and complications that I had as a kid. And not directly, because I was, like I said, I was never a swimmer. I did break
Hmm,
my arm once or twice, but it was never that big of a deal.
hmm,
Uh, but but yeah, no, 12-year-old me was like uh whatever you want to call it, fat or husky or chubby
hmm,
or
yeah.
whatever than other kids, and it bothered me. Um, it bothers me sometimes now. Um,
Hmm,
I was dealing with, what, like, am I bisexual? Am I gay? Like, what
hmm,
is my sexuality at this point?
yeah.
Um, so there was like a lot of that, like, struggle, right?
Yes.
And a lot of that, like, self-loathing that took a
Hmm,
really long time to kind of like not get over, because like we said, not that it doesn't get better, because it
yeah.
does, right?
Hmm,
Like those complications and those first time you feel those feelings when you're like in middle school and as a kid, like they feel like the worst thing in the world. and
Mhm.
they can totally 100% feel that way. But they do get easier, but it's not like they all go away. You know what I mean? Because like as an adult now, to 28,
Mhm.
some of those problems are still there, but they're
Mhm.
easier now, and so you
Mhm.
can have that experience and be able to look back and be like, okay, look,
Yeah.
like things get okay, and you can like love that self.
Mhm. Lee, Veronica, I'm going to say thank you very much for being very open, very honest. Just thank you very much for sharing that. Thank you for opening up. Thank you.
Well, thank you,
Um,
because it wouldn't be fair, right, to an audience for us talking about this book if we couldn't also be like, look, like here's it is on the sleeve, man. It is right on
mhm.
the page. Like,
The other thing I'm going to say, what's really good is um, it's that term in acting. It's either the truth, because in both books, because Veronica, like like Lee, when you guys did Just Roll with It, you now, and correct me if I'm wrong, because like you said, there's some scenes where you took some of a little bit of Veronica's life that she was going through. You changed it a little bit, but the thing is, it's an honest reality.
yeah,
That's
the
the thing, and
coreness
that's
of
the thing.
the moment is real. Like, there's the emotion behind the action, even if it's different on the page. Like, even if
Yes,
we needed for Maggie to give her like a specific problem, um, or Ty like a specific problem, is there's an emotional like truth to that
yes,
that will come like directly from one of us,
yes.
basically.
And the thing is, that's why I love both of these books, because it's from a place, it's a place, you guys are literally opening yourselves up, you know.
Mm.
Um, and that's what I love about, because that's where I can connect with the story.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
Because because again, I'm an old man, let's put it, let's face, you guys can laugh, don't worry, but I'm an old man who's reading um you know books for like preteens or kids, and I'm enjoying it because it's not, again, you guys want to make sure that the dialogue is natural, it's real, because if I start is and also too, some of the scenarios are real too,
Yeah.
because you can feel the emotion in there, you know um Veronica, because I like would just roll with it. The thing I could remember, and I still can after it, because it's been what, 2 years since we talked about the book.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
two or three, yeah.
I can still see Maggie in the chair talking to her counselor, being open up and going, "This is all the things that's happening to me," and it's just, oh, you know, that's um or like with Ty, it's in this book, like he's being overwhelmed by you know um it's just like all his negative thoughts are going
Yeah.
through him, and it's and you and but for me also too, it's also probably some outside, for like some outside stressors too, like, okay,
Yeah.
I I don't want to talk to Max. Oh, great. We got to,
Yeah.
I don't want to swim, and it just builds up,
Hmm.
you know. And those are clear, it's just these are moments that's very clear. Um, you know, and I want to talk about this a little bit, and because Lee, like you said that, because um and, because you guys wrote this book, when you guys wrote this book, is it was just going through, and correct me if I'm wrong, like Lee's experience,
Hmm.
growing up,
Yeah.
because, and as I mentioned, you know um because I have um a lesbian cousin, and we talked about this a little bit, but the thing is, I don't know what her struggles were when she was growing up, and we grew up in the 70s, You know, she would always wear boys' clothes, and you know, and but the thing was, no matter what, she was my cousin. We hung out, we did things together. You know, but I don't know what internal struggles she was going, and you know, and she came from a stable family. You know, but the thing is, I don't know what struggles she was going through. And now, you know, when I still see her, I still talk to her, hey, how you doing, and stuff like that. But I think now she's a little bit more comfortable who she is now. You know? So, but I'm gonna say thank you very much. This is a very good book. It's a,
Thank you.
it's a very, you know, it's a very powerful book. It is.
Thank you. Thank you. Because like you kind of mentioned, like with Maggie at the end and Ty as well, like, you know, we want to showcase that, like, that kind of like, you know, there's a peace that you can get, that even if the problem is not fully resolved, or like how we talked about before, like there's that ebb and flow, and there's still stuff that you deal with now years later, but like it's not the end of the world. And like, you know, you do, you know, you do get over it. You do, you know, break out from under the water, and you do, you are able to stop the monster from, you know, outside the school and just roll with it one, and like you are able to like get there, and like it is, you know, going to be okay.
I think something that was really important to me when we did the scene with Maggie and her counselor in the first book is making sure that that scene didn't really have, or at least that conversation didn't really have, you know, a conclusion of like, oh, like everything's better now. We fixed it, solved. You know, I really wanted it to be like, this is a path that you can take, you know, speaking to the reader, this is a path that you can take, you know, you can go and speak to someone. And this is the beginning of sorting things out. But it's not a scary beginning. It's not like, okay, well, now you have to do all the work. You know, this is where your options begin, kind of thing. And I think when you're a kid, without the vocabulary to talk about that, you don't know where your options begin.
You even know like what path is out. You can't imagine it because you don't know.
So being able to that was all I wanted to do, is be like, show them the door, be like, this is one of the things that you can do. And so it's not, you know, it's not that you feel this way and then you can't do anything. You know, there's this, and then from this starting point of telling someone and speaking to other people about it, you know, it leads to, you know, Maggie talks about, oh, are you going to put me on medicine? Are you going to tell my school? Are you going to tell my parents? And, you know, the therapist telling her, you know, those are all things that can happen. But what's happening now is a conversation. And I think that also stems, you know, from me having a lot of anxiety about doctors growing up. I think when you're a kid and you go to the doctor, even as an adult and you go to the doctor, doctors don't really have a lot of spare time. And so if you're like, please wait, I want to settle with my anxiety for a minute, they're like, I don't have time to wait. Like, I have to see a bunch of other patients. No doctor is waiting for a kid to calm down before they give them a shot. And that left me with a lot of anxiety growing up. But when you go see a therapist who is, you know, still a doctor, you know, all they have is time. And so you're going in there and nothing's going at a pace that you're not comfortable with. And so like, that's one of the places where you have absolute control. You know, you're not coming into that room and then suddenly being whisked away to a mental health institution, or whisked away to be put on meds, or, you know, this, that, and the other thing. So I think really important in both books is we wanted to show kind of beginnings of solutions to these problems, not conclusions. Because with both Maggie and Ty, you know, they kind of have this, okay, we opened this box and it wasn't as scary as we thought it might have been. And I think that is something that's like, you know, opening the box and beginning can be like the scariest step. And then once you do that, you realize like, okay, not like, just because I've opened the box doesn't mean everything has to be different. I can just look at it and then continue to step back and like take my time.
Lee, do you want to add anything a little bit more, even for sink or swim? about
Yeah, no,
him.
I think Veronica really kind of nails it. Like because like one of the best reviews for Just Roll With It one is one of the first reviews we got on the Amazon like page to buy the book of like the Just Roll With It one is we've been very touched to be nominated for like a couple of different awards and stuff here and there, and it's resonated with kids. An international school in Beijing reached out to us at one point that they had really liked it, and a school district in Canada had reached out, and the school
Yes.
district there had really liked it. And those are all incredibly wonderful honors that I'm so happy about. But one of the best reviews for Just Roll With It one was a parent saying that their kid had given them the book, and then they could understand their kid better. And to get that was so good. And part of the reason is we don't want to you don't want to miss the landing, right? You don't want to like put the ending for somebody who's reading the book in a specific box. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Put them push them through a door that they don't want to be at. And because you don't know what their next step should be, right? But what you can do, like Veronica said, is you can be like, hey, look, we can open this door, we can open this box, we can go down this hallway, and it doesn't have to be forever, it doesn't have to be permanent, it doesn't have to be a certain thing, but it is, you offer them those possibilities, like this is a way forward. And so to leave it like that, to not say like, yes, you're definitely, you know what I mean, Maggie's definitely going on medication, and she's definitely X, Y, and Z. Ty's definitely going to do, X, Y, and Z, and he's going to, go on like Ozempics and lose 100 pounds. Like, it's not going to happen. It's you have to come to that like internal place, and that's that piece that where you now can face options.
Yes.
And that's the kind of the ideal.
Before I start wrapping things up, I want to say one of the powerful things about both of these books is you guys are coming from a place of Maggie and Ty, because you're sharing your experience. This is what we went through, and you're giving a voice to whoever's reading this, going, "Oh my God, this is what I'm going through." Because like you said, the parent, a kid who, got the book, he went, with Just Roll With It, went to his dad and go, "This is what I'm going through. Please hear me. Now you can understand what I am going through." Because instead of a parent going, "Okay, yeah, son, yeah, just stop that. Just stop that. Stop.
Yeah, knock it off, get together, whatever. It becomes a mutual like understanding.
Yes. Because the child is not, because then they start seeing the child as who they are.
Yeah.
They're their own person. They have their own feelings. They have their I can't, their issues, and that's where they can start, parents and children can start really talking, because then they can have the time. This is where the time that they can understand each other, instead of like, stop it, because then it's almost saying, I don't have time for you, stop it, Again, thank you very much for opening up and sharing. Thank you very much.
Of course, thank you for giving us a space. Like we mentioned before, like we're very excited to be back here with you, because you're an interviewer where it's very easy to be open with. So it's very approachable. It's not hard to talk about it with you, because you're such a nice person. You make it very easy. Thank you.
I try to be nice. I'm going to be honest. I try to be nice. So, okay. But, let's move on to some fun. I want to ask a off the cuff question, because let's start moving to a little bit more fun stuff, because you guys got some early responses of Sink or Swim. What were some of the early reviews?
So far Danny has, I don't know if Danny's seen a bunch of bad ones and hasn't shared them with us, but so far Danny has shared 3 nice ones with us. we get a good review from the school library journal. We get a good review from the Bulletin. We get a pretty good review from Kirkus. And
Yes.
those are three, kind of like big places. And so it's a
Yes.
I've been reading the reviews. I'm going to go the opposite direction. I've been reading the reviews on Goodreads, and it was actually really cathartic to see one. I saw one review where someone critiqued the book with a critique that I personally agreed with. They were like, "Hey, I felt like this part of the book was a little rushed," and I was like, I felt like that part of the book was a little rushed. I was afraid of that when we were, and it's kind of one of those things where, we talked about it and I tried to figure out, is this threaded through enough? Do we kind of have this foreshadowed where people are not going to be like, oh, like, where did that come from? And I actually, I really like reading, the Goodreads reviews, and I actually really liked reading that review because I was like, it was very interesting to be like, yeah, I also felt like, I wanted more of that. And then it was kind of nice because I talked to Lee about it and he was like, I felt like we did foreshadow it enough. And I was like, I felt like we didn't. And so having like that conversation of being able to like, kind of both of these things can be true.
Yes.
Kind of like, oh, like, it doesn't, another reminder that it never has to be one or the other. It's the version of it that it is. And something that we went through with Just Roll With It was that I was constantly like, are we saying enough? Are we covering enough about OCD? Like, I don't feel like we're talking about, oh, it's, are we talking about how it's a hindrance to your quality of life enough? Are we talking about, the aspect of overthinking and relating certain objects to death, which is something that I struggle with a lot, where you think of one thing and you're like, that is a bad. I saw a post today where someone was talking about that, when you have an OCD and you see a chair and you're like, that's a bad chair. If I sit in that chair, I will die. And I was like, I didn't feel like we went into that enough, but it's like, you have to learn to accept it because you're never going to get all of it, in one book. And so that's kind of been like a nice reminder of like, both things can be true. You can have, be like, this is what we made, and next time maybe we want to do it this way. Kind of.
Like Veronica was saying, like, you get reviews from like sort of like esteemed publications, and you're like, oh, I feel like some of this confusion, this hard work, pays off. And you get other reviews where they don't get it, as much as I'd want them to, or whatever. And then like Veronica said, like,
and the
that's
most important reviews
because...
are like the reviews from kids on Amazon who's like, I like that this had a dragon in it because I want to be a vet, and you're like,
you talk to like, and all those reviews are great, but when you talk to like a little kid, like when we were just in Columbus, like you mentioned, the stuff at the top, and a little kid comes up to you and then says that they really like the book, and it really meant a lot to them in some way, and you're like, oh, okay, so this is like the best thing that's ever happened to me.
When we go to libraries a lot, because I'm a big library fan. So when we go and we see our book is there, that's a win. But when we go there and see our book is there and it's like really beat up, that's like a win. Where like,
like one of the other best moments
when we were in Ohio, there was one kid who handed us a copy of our book that was like, the cover was bent and it was like really beat up, and I was like, you took this everywhere with you. You shoved that in your backpack and brought it to school with you. And it's like, it's really nice.
We did one event in Rhode Island, which is the state I grew up in. And we had the pleasure to be introduced by a young girl who was also in middle school, who had read Just Roll With It 21 times.
Wow.
Yeah. Which is like the coolest thing ever. And we were able to do a different event in Rhode Island later with an early copy of Sink or Swim. We were able to actually run into her and let her read it for a bit as we talked. So she was able to get a preview from that. And she also said she liked Sink or Swim.
We were like, we don't care. If she likes it, that's what matters.
Yeah, that's what matters.
She's like, you could say like, oh, she's our fan. I'm like, I'm her biggest fan.
Yeah,
I'm like,
exactly.
I love her so much.
Like,
so cute.
If she likes it, we're good.
Yeah.
And so that's the idea. If we can get a different, review somewhere, like we got with Just Roll With It 1, like that parent on Amazon said, like, if we can get that for sink or swim, I'm like, there we go. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Then
Mhm.
it's so worth it. Even if you get like, even if not every part clicks, you know what I mean?
Yes.
If
Mhm.
and because not every part is going to click for everybody, and that's
That's true.
fine. You know what I mean? That you have to bake that into your understanding when you release a project. But if you can get that one review from somebody that said somewhere
Mhm.
anywhere that says like, I'm understood now, or I understand myself better, or I understand my kid better, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, the best feeling in the world.
All right. I know we talked about a little bit about some of the stuff that you guys enjoyed working on, part of Sink or Swim. Um, is there any, what was the fun or exciting thing that you guys love working on this book? Is there like one moment that stand out for you guys, or or you Lee, for you? I'm just kind of giving an example, like, like, oh my God, I can't believe you added this part in. This is so cool, or you know.
I mean, at one part specifically, I'm not sure. I think, I think for me, there's some conversations that like, for one thing, I feel like comedy writing is like
Mhm.
super difficult. And I'm not a funny person in real life, really. And so every time I try to write a joke
Mhm.
in Sink or Swim, or just roll it, and Veronica likes the joke or can illustrate it and it's really funny, I'm like, oh, okay, awesome. Like, there's a small scene in Sink or Swim where uh Ty is trying to send a text message.
Mhm.
You do the thing where you write it out and then you delete it, and you write it out again, you delete it again,
Yeah.
and you settle on something that's like totally different than what you're originally going to send because you're so
Yeah.
nervous about it. And the way that Veronica is able to illustrate that, and like the and then somebody reads it and you're like, oh
Mhm.
crap, like all of that.
When they read it and they don't respond, and you're like,
Oh my god, yeah, like Veronica is so funny to me. It's so good, and it's like I said, like really anything, every time she puts anything to the page, we're like, oh wow, I'm like, this is so much better than I could have imagined
Mhm.
it. So there is, like I said, I kind of said it earlier, there's this one specific scene that I don't want to give too much away, but
Yeah.
Kai has this big conversation with himself.
Yes.
And it's like all underwater.
Yes. Mhm.
And it's just like a lot for him, and it's cathartic, it's scary, it's complicated, it's a little messy. And it's a combination of kind of like a lot of different like feelings he's having, a lot of like
Yes.
self-hate, negative self-thought, his feelings about Max, his feelings about his sexuality, and his so much like drama that he has with swimming and everything,
Mhm.
everything. Um, I thought she did a really great job on, and that was a really fun scene for me because like writing it, I knew like she was gonna make it look awesome. It
Mhm.
was really good, and she did a great job. And even though I had high hopes for it, she blew me away again because it was really good.
That's nice. Thank you. Veronica, what about you?
I think I'm thinking of that same scene. And I remember, it was kind of something that we were struggling with at first because we
Mhm.
wanted it to be really impactful. Um, and I remember running it through our friend Paloma, who's an incredible writer, and she's really good at hitting those emotional beats. And we were like, listen, we really want this to hit, and we feel like it's missing something. And she made a suggestion, and I was like, oh, that's so good. And it was so
Mhm.
perfect. And it was such like a kind of like, I was like, she was like, oh, what if you did this? And I was like, oh,
What if
what
we
if
did
we
this?
did that?
Mhm.
Uh, and so like those kinds of discoveries, I think, are a lot of fun. I feel bad using an example that like you didn't even write.
No, I
Um,
mean like we talked about, like it's such like a big like group
mhm,
project where like, you
Yes.
know, like for like writing the script, I mean, I don't feel like I need like, every word that I write in the script needs to be in the book, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, but like the core like emotion that's on the
Mhm.
page, like
Yes.
for the script, as long as you know that can get there some way, and
Mhm.
like that's the ideal. And Veronica's just so good with that because like, we go, like we said, we go back and forth uh on a page, dialogue and action or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and eventually, like, we come to a place where like, oh, okay, here we go. This is what we're gonna do now, and this is gonna like
Yes.
really be impactful in some way. And
Mhm.
like that's like the best thing is when you can, when you have that conversation, you can feel like, okay, this is gonna be good, and then by the time you're done, you're like, okay, this is really good.
Yeah.
There we go.
Oh, okay. All right. No, but thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. We were so touched.
No, just thank you. Okay. I'm gonna wrap this up already. Two more questions. So, Lee, I'm gonna start off with you. Veronica, just chime in if Lee just accidentally forgets to mention. What are you guys' next convention or book signing appearances during the summer? You guys have anything lined up for Sink or Swim?
Yeah. I think our next one is the what is the name of that convention? Which one is it? It's Boston Kids Comics Day. It's
Here, I can pull up the list. We have one in Boston that's happening June 8th, I believe.
Oh, okay. The week that the book comes out.
Yeah,
so
it's
that's
the
really exciting.
Saturday the book comes out, so we're super excited about it. That's something that our publicist Cynthia was able to help set us up with.
So that's on the June 8th Boston Kids Comic Fest. And then it's funny, I've never been to Boston before, and now this year we're gonna be in Boston twice just in the summer. Because we'll be there, and then we're also going to be attending Comic-Con, which is also in Boston,
which is also run by the same organization, actually.
Yeah, that's more of a kind of sensory friendly convention geared towards neurodivergent folks and autistic people who, the regular convention scene can be really hectic.
Yes.
So Comic-Con is meant to be a little bit chiller, more calmer, more accessible to people who maybe don't want to be in such a crowded space. So we'll be back there for August. That is, I think, August 24th. August 24th and 25th. So that'll be nice. And then I think those are the only confirmed things that we have so far.
The other stuff, like being, set up and all of that. Yeah. So we'll be happy to be in Boston twice. So we're excited about that.
That's going to be nice. Okay. Veronica, I'm gonna start off with you, and then Lee, and then Lee join in. Any closing words to our listeners?
I think overall, first of all, thank you for listening to this episode specifically. If you chose to listen to it just because you're a fan of Jason's podcast, or if you chose to listen to it because we were on it, either way, I'm very glad, if you listen to it all the way through and listen to us talk about it, about both of our books. And that, if you choose to pick up the books and you enjoy them, that will mean a lot to us. If you choose to pick up the books and you do not enjoy them, that's also cool. Support your local library.
I mean, like Veronica said, thank you so much for everybody listening. Again, thank you so much, Jason, for having us, because it's so good to be here. And yeah, if you read Sink or Swim, and I hope it means something, I hope you feel something from it, good or bad, heck, as and so thank you for picking it up. Like Veronica said, we love our local libraries. As always,
get it from the library if you can't get it from the store.
Yeah, if you can't find it at the store, you can find it at your library.
I love
order it for
library.
Especially libraries are facing a lot of problems from a lot of critical groups, and it's good to go into your library and say thank you. We're in our library. The fact that we have been out of town and then sick is probably the longest gap we haven't gone to our local library in a long time. So we go back there too. But again, thank you everybody for listening, because it does mean a lot. And for listening to us talk for an hour and a half.
And also invite us to your library.
Yeah.
If you want to know where I am, I'm probably in your library right now, and I'm looking at all your books and looking at all the cool things that you can take out. Whenever we go out of town, I try to look at the local libraries that are there. And we went to one in Ohio. You could take out they had a whole rack of kind of quote unquote bigger items, so it was all tags. But you could take out a ukulele, you could take out this huge old-fashioned sewing kit.
Mhm.
And I'm like,
Oh God.
this is amazing that they just let you, like, you can just borrow this. And I think it's incredible. So I love a library.
Yeah.
Lee and Veronica, mahalo. Thank you for giving me another opportunity to interview, both of you. Thank you very much. I wish you both all the success, of your graphic novel, Sink or Swim. Now, listeners, this book comes out on June 4th. Now, as a former social worker, I think this book is, would be a very useful tool to both, kids and parents, especially parents who have children that are struggling with, self-image or body image and sexual identity. Because I think this is a great, uh, this would be good to be used as a, to be able to talk to your kids or your kids to talk to you about what struggles they are going through. So yeah, so your parents, if you guys get a chance, please pick up this book. You know, it's I, you know, Sink or Swim, like I said, it's a very powerful book. It's a very good book. It's well written. That I love the dialogue, flows naturally because because I read it, I enjoy the dialogue. Again, it flows naturally. And I love that you guys that they give you the time to let Ty's story breathe, you know. There's it shows that yeah, I have good days and then yeah, I have some, bad moments, but it kind of and it breathes. And the other good thing is that there's really no satisfying conclusion. The story it opens up another door, you know. That's the thing I love about the story too. That Ty's life still goes on, you know. So I want to thank Drew, the co-host of Comics for Fun and Profit, for putting this episode together. Drew, thank you very much for all your hard work behind the scenes. And if you are a new listener, please check out new episodes of Comics for Fun and Profit that comes out every Saturday. And I want to thank you, the listeners. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening to this episode. Until next time, guys. Aloha.
In a world ravaged by war and chaos, a group of survivors must band together to brave the dangers of a post-apocalyptic landscape. The year is 2000, and the world has been plunged into darkness. The nuclear fires have burned out, leaving behind a wasteland of ruins and radiation. But amidst the rubble and despair, a glimmer of hope still remains. Join Dork Day Afternoon as they face off against marauding gangs, enemy soldiers, and even the harsh elements themselves in the world of Twilight 2000. Will our heroes survive the challenges ahead? Can they keep their own humanity intact? Or will they succumb to the harsh realities of life after the end of the world? 2 Past Midnight, an actual play podcast by Dork Day Afternoon.